Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Conspiracy Farm, where we don't start the conspiracies, we just add the water. And now, your host of the most state-of-the-art, most informed podcast on the interweb, I present to you Pat Miletich and Jeffrey Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for war?
Yes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, locked and loaded. We are for another episode of the Conspiracy Farm. I'm, as always, your ever-faithful co-host, Mr. Jeffrey Wilson. And unfortunately, due to a myriad of technical difficulties, which we just could not work out for this episode, I am going to have to be flying solo with our guest today. Possibly, quite possibly, my co-host, UFC Hall of Famer Pat Miletich, will be chiming in a bit later. But, man, we've got a jam-packed episode today, ladies and gentlemen. My guest today, I had the absolute fortune of speaking to a couple years ago on my show. It's me speaking to you. And I really wanted to get, obviously, Pat, with this conversation. Man, this guy has quite the incredible story, and is, definitely turned things around in his life after, unbeknownst to him, being a part of some serious CIA drug operations, doing 20 years in the pen, and being a part of some pretty serious nefarious business that was related to, the influx of cocaine into this country, the Iran-Contra scandal, etc. Mr. Freeway, Ricky Ross, is joining us today. How are you today, sir?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing good, my man. I apologize for any of the technical issues that we have had today, my man. But it's good to finally catch up, man. How you been these last couple years? I know you've been busy since we spoke last.
Busy. The book is out. The documentary came out. And we just been grinding, trying to make the best of the rest of my life.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Freeway, Crack in the System is on Netflix right now, ladies and gentlemen. I highly suggest you check that out, man, because it's a very powerful story, Rick. I mean, since we last talked, I hadn't seen that documentary. And just to kind of, I know a lot of our listeners probably are very aware of who you are. I mean, a very tumultuous young life, living in Texas, growing up kind of in Texas, and then moving to Los Angeles, touching down in Los Angeles during the Watts riots as a young kid, having that being one of the first impressions of Los Angeles. You witness your mother murder your uncle, her brother. Man, quite a crazy life, dude. And then, obviously in certain neighborhoods, you have very limited opportunities, and you got yourself into the dope game, linking up with a guy, Nicaraguan guy, Damila Bandone. And it was just kind of a crazy thing you wound up getting yourself into, man. Looking back on it, what are your thoughts on the legacy that kind of you have left and are leaving with your past and the work you're doing now?
Oh man, it's been a journey, but I wouldn't take my life back for nothing in the world. To say the least, it's been exciting, and a learning experience. One of the things that I say is no regrets, only lessons. True.
And I kind of try to have that mantra myself, try not to look at mistakes or anything like that as failures, but definitely as learning experiences. But, 20 years, man, that's definitely a hefty lesson to learn. And looking back on that, man, I forget your guy's name who you got sentenced with. What was his name? What was his name? The gentleman Rico, yeah. So, in our last conversation, we spoke of, just that week or two before when you guys got sentenced, Rico was at the hearing with John Deutsch, former CIA head, and the whole neighborhood was just really putting him on blast. Like, dude, he was sitting there trying to deny this or that, or if you have any evidence, just take it to your local police. I mean, it was absolutely absurd. And of course, you had Michael Rupert stand up and just basically put the whole thing on blast, saying he was a part of many of drug operations. You got a robot behind you right there?
I didn't get to see. I'm at the ATM machine.
Oh. Freeway's cashing out.
I'm almost finished, though. Almost finished.
No, that's all right, man. Do your thing, baby. I know you're a busy guy. I get it. But yeah, I mean, being a part of all that, man. I mean, it has to be really crazy. And looking back, what happened with Gary Webb. Everyone knows who Gary Webb, well, not everyone, but Gary Webb, the reporter for the San Jose Mercury News, who really blew this story up. And I found it crazy watching your documentary again. It reminded me how the pressure for him to retract. Remember when the whole thing was so huge, and then he had to slowly start pulling the story in.
Well, he didn't have to do it. His newspaper did. They retracted.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean.
They the ones who came back. and distracted, and then not only that, but they pretty much fired Gary. You know, they put him in a meaningless job, and well, you know, they did the movie about him called Kill the Messenger.
Yeah,
I don't know if people went to see that.
No, absolutely.
But I did, and it was a pretty good piece. It was sad that nobody really knew that it was coming out. But I enjoyed seeing it, and I wish more people would have saw it, and they could have even focused on more areas about Gary that I knew about that I thought was important, because Gary had been doing some remarkable things for us as a people.
Well, I mean, bringing light to that situation of the CIA's introduction. I mean, and again, in your documentary, they, a couple of the policemen were like, it was one side or the other. For certain communities, the black community was like, no, they did this deliberately to destroy the community, and other sides of the police were like, no, we didn't care where we went. We were just trying to raise money to fight the Sandinistas with the Contra army. So it was just like it was an interesting take, but at the end of the day, still the destruction was still wrought in certain communities in Los Angeles because of this. And not to mention this began the whole commercialization of prisons, and you talked about it as well. A lot of these prisons are traded on the stock exchange, these corrections facilities, and part of their whole bottom line is the prisons got to be full. And with the drug laws being so crazy, talk about that, man. The work you do with and have done with trying to gain awareness to some of the drug laws, which have changed slowly, but that disparity, if you will.
Yeah, it was amazing that now marijuana is legal in 20 states, and before they were actually putting people in jail for marijuana. How sensible that was, to be putting somebody in prison for a plant that grows naturally and it also has medical benefits.
Right.
It had medical benefits that a lot of people didn't know, because scientists wasn't allowed to work with it and figure out its benefits. And before Prohibition started, they almost used this plant for almost everything, from rope to, I think even the first Bibles was wrote on hemp paper, and to find out that they were actually locking people up for something that was so useful to mankind is sensible. I think that we're going to find out, later on in life that some of the other drug crimes that we're locking people up for is just as senseless.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, when you start talking about victimless crimes, and then you start going behind the story, like with your story, and that's just one of many stories of folks who got caught up in police and government operations. Man, I mean, obviously, people could read your book as well, and obviously the documentary. I mean, your story is unique, but unfortunately, the story of government involvement in drug operations is kind of pretty well known going back quite a while. What are your thoughts today, my man? 60,000 people a year, which is essentially the Vietnam War every year, are dying from opiates. And essentially what we've come to understand, now it's not, I'm sure cocaine is still a part of the international drug trade with governments, et cetera, sanctioning it. But now heroin is everywhere, and it's killing people like crazy. What are your thoughts on, seriously, just the epidemic of people dying, but obviously government involvement in that as well?
Well, you look at how it got started, with these pharmaceutical companies encouraging doctors to prescribe opiate pills to patients. And then it's no wonder that we are in the situation that we're in right now. And with our prohibition policy, where it makes it more valuable to sell drugs in the market than it would be to sell them legal or to somewhere control it. It's a perfect setting for what we have right now.
Well, and
I don't think that it's the actual drug that's really killing the people. I think it's the cut that they're using, and I can't really think of the name of it right now.
Fentanyl is, yeah.
Right. Fentanyl is what is really killing everybody. I think more so than actually the heroin. Right.
But I mean, and you're probably right. But I mean, again, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Agenda 21 or, excuse me, eugenics policies, which basically are just population control, ways to control the population. And I think this is, I know it sounds crazy, but from a larger standpoint, I think the people who run the world find different ways to get rid of people. And I think back in the day, it was, crack and guns, and now it's heroin and, wars and vaccine. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways. No doubt about it. And that kind of leads me into kind of more of what you're doing now. Obviously, just to remind everybody, the book is Freeway, Rick Ross, The Untold Autobiography. Go check that out, man. It's a crazy read. So you like I said, you've been through so much, man. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If they want to learn everything that could go wrong in America.
Yeah. Among other things, because that's what we talk about on this show all the time, man. We've had on former Navy SEALs, former Russian Special Forces talking about the drug trade, the guns trade, trading in people's body parts throughout the world. You know what I'm saying? That's why your story is unique, but it's just one aspect of a great many that play out like this, where people are oftentimes used like you get 20-year sentences. Damila Blandon, less than that, runs a lumber company down in Nicaragua. Oliver North runs for Senate, gets a radio show, gets a presidential pardon. I mean, it's just really.
He gets a job from the DEA. He gets a job for DEA.
Exactly.
And a green card.
And a green card.
He had a green card before, but he got a green card.
It's a crazy life you have lived, my man, and it is. What was the phrase? I'm sorry, I wrote it down. What was the phrase that got you out as you were reading and learned to read? Because obviously people didn't know, man. My man Rick was illiterate for 20 years, learned to read based off of his case and reading a particular phrase.
They gave me a life sentence without the prospect of parole, and I found a phrase inside of the law book that said continuous criminal spree.
Yeah.
And what that meant is that I wasn't a career criminal, but I had been running a continuous criminal spree, meaning that I hadn't been brought to justice, and I just continues to commit crime. And those are the words that set me free.
Fascinating. There is, if people, and that happens a lot when people get inside and they learn about the law and the nuance of the law, and then they check their case and find certain technicalities which can set them free. Like I said, you weren't running a huge criminal. I mean, whatever. It was a technicality, but you used the law to your advantage. But it sucks. Like I said.
Well,
go ahead.
And that's the way it's supposed to be used. The laws are supposed to protect the innocent, and sometimes if they're abused, because they're abused by both sides.
Oh yeah.
Criminals abuse laws, but also prosecutors abuse laws, and they charge people a certain way to get them more time than what they otherwise deserve. And if they do, the law is there to protect everybody so that they don't get more time than they're supposed to get.
Well, and as we see with these drug laws, the mandatory minimums for this and that, it's crazy. People get, 10, 15 years for just minimal amounts. It's pretty wild. Also, man, moving into what's kind of also somewhat new in your life, the documentary you shot a few years ago, but obviously your name is Freeway Rick Ross, and as we all know, the individual who used to be a correctional officer that kind of used that same name, you took him to court. And you were trying to get, I believe it was $10 or $15 million for damages, and then half of the royalties, and then him obviously desisting your name, using your name. That wound up getting thrown out because of a technicality, because essentially they said you should have filed it 5 days before you were released from prison, which is just crazy. But a technicality of statute of limitations wound up getting that thrown out, and then you wound up having to pay almost $500,000 in his court fees, man. How heartbreaking was that?
No, they wanted me to pay $1 million and a half.
Oh, I'm sorry. The documentary said something about. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, they wanted me to pay $1.5 million. The judge actually granted them $1 million that I owed him, but
what are your thoughts on taking that L, man? That was a big one for you. Obviously, he continues to go on, and I'd say this. I'm a regular Joe, man. I have a bartending job, and I was talking to some cats last night, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to interview Freeway Rick Ross tomorrow, and they're like, They just didn't know, dude. They're like, the only Rick Ross I know is the Rick Ross, the rapper, and then Freeway, the dude from Bad Boy. Like, nobody, the young kids today, and I'm glad you do what you do in the speaking tours. Some of these young kids, I'm in St. Louis, and some of these young kids just don't know. And, it really behooves them to educate themselves on yourself and your story. And that, the fact that Rick Ross, who walks around as the rapper or whatever, was really a correctional guy and didn't make money off drugs, etc. Basically he was one of the original identity thefts, right? He stole your identity.
A classic, if nothing else. It's definitely a classic identity theft. If this was a situation where he had stole my credit cards and bank book, they'd have definitely locked him up. But the way he stole my name, I guess people don't feel that a name has any value to it, so they allow him to continue to use it. But if you steal somebody's car, there is no statute of limitation.
Well, his story and how exactly. I mean, it's in the way he supposedly came about it. And in football, they called me Big Boss, or he accidentally said Rick Ross. I mean, that was such horse shit. You know what I mean? And the fact that the fact that he got out of it on such a technicality of statute of limitations just means he knew he was wrong and just kind of like what you did, used the law in his favor. But I also remember hearing something about that judge had ties to Universal or to the record company or something like that. Are you aware of anything like that?
Oh yeah, she used to be a lawyer for the company. So, they said that there was no way that we would be able to get a lawyer that didn't have ties to Universal. Universal was such a big company, and they view so many lawyers and employed so many lawyers, I guess, to rip people off, that there's no way that you could get a lawyer that didn't. I mean, have a judge that didn't have ties to him.
Yeah. I mean, and again, that seems like such a horseshit technicality to throw up the stat. You should have did it 5 days before. 5 days ago, you would have had a case. Now, that 15 million. It just.
But when should somebody not give something stolen back?
No, I'm with you, man.
I mean, if you have it for 40 years, if somebody had something for 40 years that they stole from somebody and they get caught stealing it, I don't care how long they had it. If they had it 200 years and they get caught that they stole it from the person, and if the person can prove that they stole it from them, then it should be returned.
And it just goes beyond clear common sense that the dude, I mean, from your name to, I mean, granted, you're not, an obese cat like he is, but, the beard, the shaved head, I mean, it's just pretty plain and simple. He jacked your whole deal. But, I mean, it is what it is. And unfortunately, whatever. Sometimes we have to take L's as graciously as we take W's. But I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I do have a couple more questions, man. I want to jump into some of your vegan stuff here in a minute, but I don't know if you've noticed on TV and cable, there's a lot of I forget who produces it, but you got the who killed Biggie, who killed Tupac, and then you got the death row kind of chronicles going on right now. Not a lot of people know that you had a very instrumental role in the beginning of Death Row Records. If you don't mind, if that's public information. Talk a little bit about your role in the origins of Death Row Records.
Well, me and Harry O was fellas when
Harry O. Michael Harris is the guy. Harry O. is his name, but Michael Harris is the gentleman you just referred to. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Correct. Me and him were Sally's when they formed Death Row, and I was sitting at the table with him when him and Suge had their first meeting. So and David Kenner. So I was very, very instrumental in what they were doing.
From a finance standpoint?
No, I didn't do any financing. I was just sitting in the meetings and, and in the discussions, pretty much.
Okay.
I was there when Harry came up with the idea for the name. And, I was there when he told David Kenner about making him more money in the music business than he had ever made as an attorney. And I was there the day that he introduced David Kenner and Harry O to each other.
And a great documentary I saw on that, I think it was called Welcome to Death Row, I think it was called. And it's so textbook, and I'm not trying to get myself killed, Suge. All love to you, brother. But it's just so crazy how textbook Suge turned on Harry O once things start blowing up. once him and David Kenner divested themselves from Godfather Entertainment and then created whatever they created, LLC, and then tried to get out of basically paying what you guys really deserved, what he deserved. And I think his wife, Lydia Harris, wound up winning a pretty hefty lawsuit, but I don't know if she ever got any of that money.
I don't think she did either. Yeah, it's just funny how people, you can help people and then they don't want to give you your just dues. They would rather take it and squander all the money on foolishness rather than helping the people who actually gave them the start.
And there was plenty of money to go around too, and that was without Harry O's financing and obviously the Solar Records access. I mean, that just wouldn't have happened. So yeah, definitely Suge definitely bit the hand that fed him. But
he did.
So yeah, what do you think about those shows now, man? They got those. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And Suge's a friend of mine. He's in jail right now, fighting for his life.
Is he still in jail? I was going to ask you, what's the status of that case? That thing's been going on for a long time.
He's still in jail. I don't know the actual status. He hasn't went to trial yet, but I hear the case is pretty hefty against him.
Well, yeah, he was seen on video running over a gentleman on the set or outside of the set of Straight Outta Compton, however many years ago that was. Seemed like forever, but yeah.
It was like 2 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like forever, man. I don't know why it seems like that movie seemed like it was a long time ago. But those shows now, man, the resurrection of this story once again, this well-produced series that I forget what channel it's on. You got a couple of them, like I said. The Biggie and Tupac.
A&E just did one called The Death of Tupac.
Okay. Which,
They just did that one. And I also played in that one.
Did you?
Yeah. I had a role in that one.
Yeah, that's what's up. But I mean, it's interesting to see this story coming back out and kind of being a thing again.
It is. And they did a pretty good job on that piece. So if people get a chance, they should go on there and check it out. It's a very well done documentary, and I believe that they proved Tupac.
They proved who killed who? Who did they? Do you remember who they said?
I'm gonna let people go on there and
okay.
With their own,
no spoilers. I got you.
Yeah. But I think they made a pretty good point on that. It was produced by Ben Crump for A&E. So if they get a chance, they should go on there and check it out. But I think they did a pretty compelling job about who killed Tupac.
Yeah, it's a very, very fascinating story. I'm a conspiracy guy, so I definitely go hard in that one as well as Biggie because, it's kind of interesting. There's been no real suspects in, a couple of the biggest, murders, at least in the world of hip-hop that, we've seen. But crazy world we live in. Yeah, before I let you go, my man, watching some of your videos, it was kind of interesting. Even from a few years ago, you talk about you live a vegan lifestyle. You don't really drink. You don't smoke. It's, you really consider yourself, very considerate of how you treat the temple and what you put in your body. And I've saw some of your videos, you hanging out with a vegan chef, etc. Tell me about that role of your vegan lifestyle plays in your life. If of course you still are a vegan, I'm assuming you are.
I am. I think I'll be a vegan for the rest of my life. It's just so many reasons why we should be vegans. I believe that what we eat is who we are, and I attribute a lot of the violence that we're seeing in this country is attributed to how we eat and how we treat other animals. A lot of the animals die a treacherous life, have cows standing in line, and the cows, they know when they're about to be killed.
Yeah.
They can feel it. And, and that translates through the meat and through us, And once I found out that I didn't need to kill anything for me to live, then I let it go.
Yeah, that is a very that's a very interesting take, and I'm not a vegan, but I try to be conscious. I try to eat like halal meat or just as clean as organic as possible. But you're right, man. When the animals suffer the trauma and you ingest that, you on some weird metaphysical level, and I can't explain it, you ingest that trauma and that energy. So I agree, and Pat would chime in too. Like, we were just talking the other day with the school shootings. these kids' diets. The fact that, not only are doctors overprescribing opiates, they're overprescribing these SSRIs, these serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which all these school shooters seem to be on. So I agree with that, man. Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. I think, like I said, I'm not necessarily vegan, but I try to eat as clean as possible because I think that's very important.
Well, we all got to start somewhere. So, at least you're thinking about it. You made some steps, in the right direction, and that's a start, and I think that they said if everybody was vegan, there would be no hunger in the world.
Well, I mean, yeah,
the amount of land that it takes for us to raise a cow on, they could feed hundreds of people on that same plot of land.
Well, yeah, and another thing we talk about on the show, our food's tainted, our water's tainted, our soil is tainted, and our air is tainted. So even when eating greens, you got to be cognizant of where it was, the soil it was in and what was sprayed on it, et cetera, et cetera. So food is just another one of those odd conspiracies, in my humble opinion, that, there's a reason why you can get so much crap at fast food for nothing. And, avocados are $4 or $5, you know what I mean? So just something to think about,
For sure. I totally agree. And I hope that other people take the time out to do more research on veganism.
Yeah, again, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. Mr. Rick Ross, I thank you so much for your time, my friend. Where can a little shout out? Where can we track you down? Get some of them cool ass T-shirts. Where can we get the book? Where can we see the documentary?
You can get my T-shirts and the book from freewayrickyross.com. I got the books, T-shirts on there, and so forth. The doc's not on there yet, but we'll have that out in a couple months. So people will be able to buy that on DVD as well.
Cool. Again, man, thank you so very much for your time, and I appreciate all you do, man. I'm happy for you, bro. I mean, you could be sitting in a penitentiary right now doing life, and you're out living life and trying to make some changes and make some amends on some of your past ways, my friend. So I appreciate your hustle, brother, and I appreciate your time.
No doubt. I appreciate you having me on the show. Thanks. And everybody, too, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Freeway Ricky and on Facebook at Freeway Rick Ross.
You heard it, ladies and gentlemen. The real Freeway Rick Ross. Thank you very much for your time. So, sir, continued success. Peace, ladies and gentlemen. And stay tuned because there will be more. Take care, guys.